All right, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Let's see here. We probably should have you run through the roll, Sarah, just because we have Chris joining us. I think she knows everybody, but we'll do it anyway.
Okay, you bet. So we got Chris Corpola, chair of the CJCC, myself, coordinator for the CJCC. My name is Sarah Benedict, by the way. We've got joining us today, we've got Chris Meyer, judge-elect. We've got County Board Supervisor Jim Tripp. We've got County Manager Paul Miller. We've got District Attorney Andrea Nodoff. We've got Sheriff Kevin Bigg. And we've got Clerk of Court Katie Shalley. And then we also have Public Health Caitlin Engel participating as well. We are expecting a few more to join us. So once they come in, I'll just announce them for the record. So back to you.
All right, since we are doing a joint meeting today with Executive and Operations, we have 2 sets of minutes. So I would take a motion for approval of the Executive Committee meeting minutes from March 24th. Paul moves.
I'll second.
Kevin seconds. Any discussion? Otherwise, all those in favor of approving those minutes, I guess that's Executive Committee, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. So similarly, entertain a motion for approval of the Operations Committee meeting minutes from May 26th.
So moved.
Kevin, a second. Paul, absent any discussion, I don't imagine there is any. All those in favor of approving those minutes signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries. All right, we have 2 consideration of action to be taken by our committee today. The first being a letter of support for the 2022 TAD Treatment Alternatives and Diversion Grant.
So moved.
There. Oh, you're right. Good move, Paul. Second.
Second.
Second by Kevin. All right. Sarah, would you like to speak to that?
Yes, thank you. So we're entering a new cycle for the Treatment Alternatives and Diversion Grant of the state. They're having a webinar right now as we speak on the announcement for the next period. It'll be from 2022 to 2026. There is additional funding that the state is putting towards TAD. So we are requesting a letter of support for our grant application for the next cycle to continue to support our treatment opportunity program and our criminal justice assessor protocol that we have in place. The reason I'm asking so early and ahead of time is because the grant period is probably going to be open before our next our last CJCC meeting of the year. So asking for that letter of support from the CJCC. Essentially, I'm asking this group for approval to go ahead and draft that letter of support for the CJCC to approve at our July 15th meeting. Any questions?
All right. So we have a motion to approve submission of a letter of support that would ultimately go to the CJCC at its next meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Similarly, we have a letter of support for MPD Behavioral Health Officer grant applications. Can I have a motion in support of that letter of support?
Your turn, Sheriff.
So moved.
Second.
There you go. All right, Sarah, you want to speak to that?
All right, Chief Atkinson, unfortunately, is not here today to speak to this. He has requested a letter of support for the behavioral health officer position that they are looking to secure grant funding for. So essentially, this would be a letter of support from our CJCC that would go to, along with his grant applications. He's looking at several different grant applications. We approved one last time we met, so he's asking for another one for this position. It's part of Project Hope, part of the overall kind of diversion of people that have mental health, substance abuse issues into treatment in lieu of the criminal justice system. This would be a law enforcement officer with additional training in behavioral health.
Any other questions about that? Otherwise, all those in favor of submitting a letter of support signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign, motion carries. All right, agenda item number 5, 2022 budget preparations.
Right, wanted to update the group that CJC division did submit the budget for 2022, round 1. So we did reduce our operational costs for about $5,000. Some of the fixed costs are going up, so the budget overall is slightly larger than it would be in past years due to wages and benefits. But essentially, just trying to maintain what we have, reduce costs. We have had reduced costs because of COVID and because of not meeting in person. So hopefully we can kind of sustain some of those savings in the future by some of these hybrid meetings. But round 1 was submitted. It will go through, many of you will have already seen it and will see it again. And it really goes through the county process overall. So any questions there, just really trying to maintain what we have.
Sarah, do you know off the top of your head, just a ballpark, what is the total budget amount for the CJCC?
Yeah, so total ask is, well, we've got several different grants. I'm anticipating our TAD grant is going to be going up. So that's part of it. Our revenues are down because of Marcy's Law ramifications. We can't be collecting fees on different programs. So overall, our budget is, looks like so this year, we're at 240,000. We're looking at 260,000 next year. And that's largely due to benefit changes. And then just some, modest wage increases that were from HR. Essentially, our budget is the staff. We've got 5 staff. And we also have the drug testing with treatment court. That's our most costly line item. We did secure levy funding from DHS to move over to CJCC to cover our program assistant and get her off of the family treatment court funding. So that 260,000 also includes the wages for that part-time staff as well. So overall, we're under our budget that we would have had last year. Any questions at this early stage? I know it's early, just want to keep the group updated.
I'm just curious, is the county able to apply for TAD funds for treatment court, or are we not because we have the TAD program for the top program?
So they do fund diversion programs and treatment court programs. So there is potential to request additional funding from the state to cover that, but we can't supplant county funding. So essentially, we would have to reduce that off of our budget and hope that we get additional funding from TAD, on the grant. And that's really all, the state puts out the grant announcement, and depending on who's applying for funds, they kind of divvy it up from there. So it is unknown what type of additional funds that we could receive. But yes, to answer your question.
All right. Absent any questions or additional conversation about that? July 15th CJCC meeting planning agenda. So typically this would be an executive committee agenda item in terms of putting together the agenda for the July 15th meeting. But since we're combined, we are going to do it today.
Yeah, so our CJCC meeting, the quarterly, is going to be coming up here in July on the 15th. So that's a Thursday at 4 o'clock. So far on the agenda, we do have the action items as far as the TAD letter of support. We're going to have a Lighthouse Award for Judge Smeltzer. He's departing, so we'll have a ceremony there. And then we were planning an education portion where about 20 minutes or so, we were going to show some of the highlights of a presenter that we had really contracted with and to do some specialized training on trauma and substance abuse in the areas of that they overlap. So we already have that education materials. We were just going to really kind of use some of the highlights. One of the questions that I have for the group as far as where we're going to meet, and typically we meet in Judicial Center, large multi-purpose room that is not outfitted for virtual meetings. So if we were 100% in person, we can meet there. If we're looking at doing hybrid meetings, we might want to consider downstairs of the government center here where IT can give us support. If we're doing virtual meetings, everybody needs to bring their laptops. Not everybody necessarily has laptops. Not everybody's a county employee. So I guess we do have a decision to make as far as where we're going to meet and how we're going to meet for the July meeting. And then if there's anything additional folks would like to see on the agenda.
As far as the location is concerned, I'm in favor of meeting in room 54, the county boardroom in the government center. Encouraging those who have laptops to bring them. Those that do not, there is a camera that will be set up to capture the room. Those who do not have laptops at least will be able to be in person. The hybrid seems to be working out pretty well otherwise. So I just feel like that would be the preferable place to meet.
So essentially a hybrid meeting, Paul, you're saying a hybrid meeting offering at room 54 for those who choose to attend in person, and it's set up so we can do it virtually as well.
Yeah, and there's already been a lot of positives. You know, the judges don't have to leave necessarily and travel to, you know, from one building to another to participate. The sheriff doesn't have to travel, but he can still participate. So we're finding that's the case with the hybrid meetings we're doing anyway. So.
Anyone opposed to that being the meeting structure or venue? All right, we'll go with that. So additional agenda items. I know that we've had discussions, and one of my desires is to make those meetings not just report out, but have some kind of greater purpose to them. So that is part of the reason why we've chosen this year to opt into doing at least a small segment of some kind of shared training or information. And so Carol Ackley, who is a substance use treatment provider in Minnesota, but lives in River Falls, spoke at the Wisconsin Association of Treatment Court Professionals Conference 2 years ago, maybe, I think. And then, and people were super impressed with what she had to say. Very different take on substance use. And then she did a training. We hired her through the Family Treatment Court grant to do a training for a number of staff about, it must have been 3 years ago. She was at the the Treatment Court conference, and then we brought her in before COVID and did training with staff. And then but we did record it and got her permission to record it. And so we thought we could use some of that because it's It's super well done. Anything, other things that we should do at that meeting?
We'll certainly have a written report on activities, and if anything comes up in between now and then, we'll include it on the agenda or the written report. All right. I just want to note that we do have Chief Atkinson joining us and Judge Smeltzer in addition. So thanks for being here.
All right. Our next agenda item is the criminal justice, our next oversight area. So if you'll recall, we're going to bring, so last month we brought 2 areas of focus, and that was a lot in terms of smushing it into an hour. And so we scaled back. We're going to do 1. And one of the things that we looked at, so one of the former work groups was the data work group, and we would review the information that we have collected, aggregate information that we've collected. We would review that every time that we met, and then so I thought we would start with this one part. There's a two purposes to sharing this information at this point in time. One is just the continued review of the areas of oversight. But the second is that if you would sort of be thinking as we move into items 8 and 9, if you would be thinking as you look at this data as to whether there's anything that piques your curiosity and or your idea generation towards things that we should be especially tending to as a group with regard to criminal justice in our county. So, Sarah?
Okay, well, hopefully you can see my shared screen through a PowerPoint together. So in your packet, there was the dashboards for the month of May, April, March. We've previously looked at the earlier months. I also included our companion document that kind of explains some of the acronyms and some of the programs for clarification. I think one of the goals that we were hoping to accomplish today is kind of get on the same page with some of the nomenclature that we use to on our dashboard and give an update really sort of mid-year here as far as the trends that are coming in. So I'll just get started overall, and feel free to holler out if you have questions as we go through. So, and this information really parallels what we have in our on our dashboard. But I just want to start with the jail data as far as the average daily population. 2021, we're in blue here. So you can see that we're lower than we have been in a normal year, but kind of tick back up from our last COVID year. So we're still seeing a reduced number of individuals getting booked into jail or held into jail. So, but not too far from last year's numbers. Looking at the demographics of the folks that are in jail, this kind of wildly swings from month to month, as you can see. I do have our population breakdown up there just for reference, but you know, it's hard to make too many trends. But when the numbers are low, those percentages can fluctuate quite a bit. But we tend to see an overproportion of minorities in our jail overall. The end of month snapshot gives us a.
I'm sorry, Sarah, could you go back to that last one?
Yes.
Just graphically as a presentation, the proportion of the blue to the orange, the proportion of white to black in this case, graphically is pretty far off.
It is, isn't it?
It's very far off, and I think that could be construed as being deliberately misleading.
No, it's the slide.
I know it's not.
So it's supposed to be 100%. So yeah, it should be a 12% slice, not,
Right.
I'm not sure what happened there. But each of these represents 100%. So yeah, it looks like there was some, something manipulating or funny going on here with the slide, but I guess just instead of looking at the shape of it, I'm just kind of highlighting the percentages, and I can clean that up before I ship it out.
Okay.
Yeah, that's number 3. No, that's a good catch, Paul. Thank you. All right, so now we're looking at that snapshot. So the consistent measure at the end of the month of who's in our jail. This gives us an idea who's held pretrial, that's before their case is adjudicated, who's on a probation hold, and then who's serving a sentence. So we've been typically seeing that, a third in each category, and this does vary from month to month. Looking at our law enforcement proxies, this is the information from Menomonie Police. So we are still seeing the same general trends where a lot of the contacts that we have with our law enforcement officers, with individuals out there with low risk individuals. This also can vary from month to month. Since our numbers have been lower, it does kind of water down those percentages, but typically most folks are low risk or medium risk, with a smaller percentage of those being high risk out there. I do want to note that we did complete a proxy training video for law enforcement with Menomonie Police and with Brenna Jasper's assistance with our communication team. So Chief, I don't know if you have approved that for distribution, but I think it would be helpful for us to share that with the Sheriff's Department once it is available, because the number of proxies, we're still getting them in, but the numbers are definitely lower. I don't know if that's due to not completing the proxy or just that, lower contact with people out there in general.
I think first part of it, yes, it's been approved. All of our staff has watched it too, so they've seen the update. As far as the numbers being down, I think it's just a lower self-initiated contact. I had work rules in place too that governed a lot of that, so that would have that down. And then some of it too, I think, is just if, depending on the situation, if they're doing the proxy, and we have a lot of newer people too, so some of them, I think maybe we're confused as to when they should do a proxy, when they shouldn't do a proxy. And I'm hoping that now that those restrictions are lifted and people have watched it, we'll see that ticking up again. So that way we can determine or have a little bit better idea of who's low, medium, and high risk. So if you need that, I certainly can have them that video burned to a Blu-ray and have that distributed, or a flash drive to departments if they want it.
I think that would be great. And right, we have seen the numbers just go up for May for MPD as far as the proxy completion. So we're seeing that immediate results just kind of based on the training. So that would be great if you could share that electronically.
Will do.
With us. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, moving on to the Sheriff's Department. So where we had 89 proxies come in from MPD, we had 61 come in from the Sheriff's Office. Similar trends where, by and large, most of them are low risk individuals that are getting the proxy completed, medium risk, and then to a lesser degree, the high risk. But we still are, this is our high risk folks. So we're still, those are those familiar faces that are really cycling through our system here. Moving on to the pre-charge diversion program, just want to show some of the trends in the first 5 months or so. I think what's really exciting here is the number of people that are referred by law enforcement has went up drastically. So again, Chief, I think this is due to the training and reinforcement that you're giving your staff on the pre-charge program itself. So seeing a good number of referrals come in. And then there is a little bit of lag to get them actually in the program. So the entered program is ticking up too for the year. So that's the DA's pre-charge program.
That's the one that Brad does?
Yep, that's the one that Brad oversees, and folks are 6 months crime-free. They watch a video, do perhaps some community service or other thinking reports, but really low risk first-time offender programs. So been seeing a lot of people go through this program and a lot of success. Looking at the DAGPs, so this is just the deferred acceptance of a guilty plea, just looking at the trend lines up and down, but those are continuing to move through the system. Looking at the treatment opportunity program, so the referrals, I just want to highlight the blue line is the referrals. Those numbers have been down, but we are starting to kind of see some people work their way into the program. This is one that folks come into with an agreement, so it does have to work through the court process. We have a census, we're serving about 25 right now. Our goal is at 30 at any one time, so we're doing good as far as that. This program can last from 9 months up to 24 months, just depending on the agreement length. So some folks stick with us quite a while, and some can get through it. This is another one where we've had really good results as far as people getting that case management, getting connected with treatment, and not coming back into the program. The state's actually reached out to us and asked us to help Polk County get their diversion program up and running, because they identified us as one of the more high functioning diversion programs out there. So we'll help our neighbors to the north. Looking at treatment court, so census our numbers are pretty low. Our capacity is 25. Currently, we've got 8 in the program. We have had just a few graduations, terminations. The numbers here, again, the referred numbers, we're not getting too many people in, and it usually takes quite a bit of time. People usually don't kind of sign on to this program until the end of their court case. So we really continue to see a kind of a gap between the time that they're referred and the time that they start the program. Looking at family treatment court, our numbers here are kind of ticking up. We're up to 7. We've already had some new enrollments in June, but just really it's important that we're getting the referrals in, so they're coming in. And then really trying to engage them with the program, encourage them to participate, to really get the wraparound support to be successful in reunifying with their children. Looking at court appearance rate, so the court cases that have come through the system are increasing. So that's the blue line here. I'm sure the judges feel the pain of all those cases coming through the system. Appearance rate has been pretty decent. Our appearance rate is about 90% overall. This doesn't give it percentages, but these two bottom numbers give us percentages of people that are not showing up, those failures to appear. So those are the ones that really do cost our system a lot of time and effort. Missed court appearances, rescheduling court appearances, putting a warrant out, having police pick them up, bring them in. So this is, continues to be a thorn in everyone's side. The good news here, the public safety assessment that we are going to be automating with our assessment protocol does the software that we're going to be using does have some additional reminders for court appearances. So I know the Katie's office, the clerk of court's office, does work hard to provide notification in many different ways of court appearances. So we'll just have another tool to help some of these folks show up for those scheduled appearances. Real briefly, looking at the criminal justice assessor information, This gives us a sense of really who's being booked and held for a failure to appear. That is the blue line. So you can see, in the month of February, 48% of those on the jail intake list were failures to appear. So, those again really do cost our system quite a bit. And then this has some of our mental health screening information. So we offer assessment for mental health and substance use voluntarily, and some people participate and some people don't. But those that do, we tend to continue to see that high level of severity. Internalizing disorder, so that could be depression, anxiety, really kind of putting that pressure back on oneself. And then the externalizing disorder, that's more of acting out, being potentially aggressive or anger, or kind of directing that mental health angst outward. So that tends to not be as high as the internalizing disorder, but again, indicators that a lot of the folks that are getting booked into jail have what we would call diagnosable mental health disorders. Looking at that same population, the drug screeners, in the last 5 months, we see that this has been kind of all over the place. Typically, we see at the end of the year about 30% meth, 30% alcohol. So it's really only in this past month that we've got kind of a similar trend to what we would see in a typical month. But our numbers definitely have been reduced over the first couple of months of the year. So alcohol and meth tend to be the most problematic drugs that folks are voluntarily disclosing. Looking at our jail reentry program in the last 5 months, our numbers have been low, and this has been largely due to COVID and really reduced movement and restrictions in the jail. They are creeping back up. Our June numbers are quite high already. But since that program started, we've served 196 individuals with the reentry program. And that's largely done in the facility itself with some peer support on the outside. That same population, just looking at their assessed criminogenic needs, which is a required component of the reentry program, you can see that the needs are high. Antisocial thought, antisocial perspective, antisocial peers, substance abuse, marital, family, lack of support is what that refers to. Lack of success with employment, lack of success with education to a much lesser degree. And then leisure, really not doing constructive things with their time. That's the, idle hands kind of cliche there. The same population, looking at their identified needs, this GED one is incorrect. The number is like 14%. So the numbers kind of match. We've got mental health needs. 88% are identifying mental health needs, 69% substance use needs, medication or physical health needs. Some need critical documents. Housing and transportation are to a lesser extent of the folks in this year. And then employment, well, folks didn't have necessarily a history of not good employment. They're currently in need of employment. And then the GED was actually super low level. That's 13% needed GED. So that is the data show of the last 5 months, just really trying to synthesize all those dashboards in a little bit more consumable format. Any questions or issues or discussion points?
I guess I just have one. We're comparing our jail population by race and demographics. Why don't we do the same thing for males versus females? Because our jail population is about 75 to 80% males, where we are 20 to 25% females. I think it's a fair thing to throw out there as well. I mean, if we're going to look at numbers,
Right.
Well,
It's kind
we-
of a
we have
joke that we've said at times, until we get to that 50%, women aren't really representing. But I guess it goes back to the risk when we're talking about men and women. Men, younger men tend to be riskier by nature. So I think that's part of the science behind it. But right, if we're comparing it to the general population, we should expect about 50-50. We are, as are seeing more and more females coming into the criminal justice system, not only here, but it's a trend across the country. But that's a fair point. Chris, you're going to say something?
Well, I would say, don't we do track it though? It's on our smash board.
We do, but when we're comparing it to like the general population to say, that,
Oh, I
we only
see.
got
Like,
30%
so the
female in
composition of
jail.
the general population is 50% men, 50% women. What does the jail look like? Composition of the general population is X number of white people, Hispanic, blah, blah, blah. Got it.
Right.
I see.
And part of the challenge too is, we should be comparing it to a criminal justice population, not just the general population, but that is harder to quantify. And these stats are census stats from 10 years ago. So we're still waiting for the current, census numbers. So, right, we are, it is not necessarily a fair comparison. And Chief, I know you've done a lot of research and can talk about that as well.
Yeah, we did an examination on folks that we would arrest and cite and who we would refer or take into physical custody. So we broke that down into ethnicity or race too. So it took a while, but it can be done through our RMS. So it's an option for at least this group to consider in the near future if we want to kind of study who we're bringing into who we are actually bringing into custody or ticketing or pulling over, that kind of thing.
So blending that data of review with local challenges, collaboration, and priorities, is there anything that sticks out? And this is sort of our opportunity to be forward thinking around where would we like the focus of this group to be going forward. We had all of those work groups. Many of them are going to continue, not the work groups themselves, but the work continues. But is there is there something else that we should be paying attention to as a group? So just by way of a couple of things that we've tossed around before in the data group, and I believe also in the evidence-based decision-making group, I know that one of our big system drivers in our system here in Dunn County are OWIs. And I know that Judge Peterson has had some interest in exploring an OWI court. And the other one that we have really bantered around with in the data work group are those failure to appears. And is there something different or creative that we might be able to do? Because when you look at those numbers of roughly 50 to 60 people a month who are failing to appear, and you extrapolate that out over all of the human resource and financial resource that it takes to manage those after the fact, and then you look at the incarceration numbers for that population of people, seems like we could get relatively quick bang for our buck if we dropped that number by even 10%. But those are just sort of my takeaways from looking at that data.
I would pose just a thought, and this is probably for Ms. Nodoff and Judge Peterson, if he's with us, and Kevin and Eric, you probably see it as well. But I still see, especially over this last year, I still see our meth problem. I don't get a feel that we're gaining on it for whatever reason. I just don't know, if we got to do some adjustments there. And one thing just to throw out there, with a lot of our meth use is could we develop something where potentially that we do some of the actually treatment with addiction while folks are in jail. Often we try to do our drug courts and stuff. People are released from jail. They're out in the community. But with this particular population, and it depends on how we sentence and stuff, is there some, evidence that would suggest that maybe having a good, while they're incarcerated, that they're released to get out for that treatment? I know we do that sometimes, but it's just a thought whether we should rethink a little bit what we're doing. Because Andre, I don't know, but I'm not so sure with what shows up every day that, we're really making some solid gains in this area. And I've been doing this a long time.
Well, we seem to be chasing the same 100 people around this county. I mean, for the last 10, 12 years, and it's just a revolving door. And 10% of the population takes 90% of our time. It's just like employees. 10% of your employees as a manager take 90% of your time. There's 10% of the population takes 90% of your time as law enforcement. And if we're chasing the same 100 people around and around and around, the dog's never gonna catch his tail.
Yeah, I think the judge is onto something there, and I don't know if this is possible because I don't run a jail and don't have that experience with it. But doing like a pretrial treatment type piece, I understand they're not guilty, they're innocent until proven guilty. But if they're there on or being held because they can't post bond or other restrictions, is that a possibility to secure them with treatment options for meth? Because I tend to agree with the sheriff that there is a consistent group of people that substance use addiction is really driving some of their behavior, along with probably some mental health, some dual diagnosis issues. Is there a way to do that, to do those releases, or are the restrictions that need to be put in place with them really don't allow that? I don't know the answer, so I'm kind of putting that out there.
Well, yeah, and Eric, you're absolutely right. I think there's that. My whole point was maybe we have to rethink a little bit, because I've always heard often that it's important to get them into a treatment fairly soon, if that can be accommodated. So it's a thought, and but I think we got to do something a little different because there's always a happy medium, and I get the treatment component. I'm 100% behind treatment, but we also got to figure out, do we have a system that keeps folks accountable while they're going through this treatment process, and how is that balanced out so that we can have better outcomes? Just a thought.
I think it's a worthwhile one for this group to explore, because methamphetamine is such a brutal thing in the county, and for any of us who've worked for a while, we're seeing now generations of families coming back. It's the grandparents, it's the parents, and now the kids are facing the addiction. So if they are in the facility and we can work something out, I think it's worth exploring. I think the other combination for the group is treating it almost like a public health type emergency. What are the root causes of this? And we know what the criminogenic needs are. So if we can start working with youth on education, getting them to their resources, and then dealing with their parents, getting them, which you already got some things like with family treatment court. So I think we've got some of those pieces in place. It's maybe just exploring how we're utilizing it. Definitely would be a suggestion for the executive group to consider as a driving factor for the operations committee.
So if we were going to start from a data, kind of a baseline, or that's not the right word for what I'm about to say, but we're going to start from a data standpoint. And we were going to look at that kind of those 100 people, however many there are, those 100 people, are there things that we would want to know before we started to craft a solution about the composition of that group?
Yeah, I think you would have to take a look at what are the common names that are coming in and out of the jail. So if we're looking at the methamphetamine, for example, we identify who are the people that have maybe been arrested more than once. We certainly can, on an internal law enforcement side, cross-reference with what we have for either active investigations that are taking place or based on known intelligence, pare that group down. And then a good chance if they've been into the jail, maybe they might have had some assessments that were done. So we might have an idea on whether it's the lower floor needs or it's a sociopathic. And then try to determine what are the majority or who we're trying to target and decide, is this an issue where, yes, they're going to need some kind of treatment, but are they going to need cognitive behavioral therapy? Are they going to need like an education? That doesn't maybe not be the big driver for it. And then try to develop a program based on those assessments that we're doing, because that's giving us that evidence. And I think we've got a healthy baseline. I think the law enforcement agencies have the intelligence capabilities for our records to determine who are the people we're investigating and having the complaints. So that's my suggestion on that part, because I think the data will help us drive and steer us to the right evidence-based solution.
Right, and so I guess what I'm seeing is more names of more variety than I have in the past. So less frequent flyers, more younger people. And I think just the availability of meth out there in the community. I was at a tavern last weekend and somebody found meth on the ground, on the floor of the bar. So, I mean, that is just out and about and people are just dropping it out of their pockets. It's just crazy. But, as we were looking at our data, we have a treatment opportunity program. We have a treatment court and a family treatment court, and the numbers are below capacity. So if we've got the population out there and we're assessing them, we can get them into the right programs. But, we need to get them referred and in the pipeline to get some of these already, to connect with the existing programs that we have. But I think I jotted down, there's some really good ideas as far as looking at the data, looking at those that are coming in, not only with meth charges, but maybe other charges, and then have meth as an underlying driver. I think we could absolutely dig into that data more to help us craft better solutions and also identify why we're not getting these people referred into the programs.
The other thought that comes to mind is that one data point that I think about, because this speaks to the work that Chief is doing with regard to connecting people earlier on in the process, even pre-involvement. But one of the things that we were able to do when we looked at mental health prevalence and substance use prevalence in the jail was we were able to give a treatment provider the list. They can't tell us from that list who they've served in treatment, but they can tell us how many of those people that they've served in treatment and how many times. So if we had a list of, say, 100 people, and our place would be able to say, yep, we've seen 30 of those people before, average 3 times, or we've seen 10 of those people before. I think that would help craft too, where in the process you put your efforts. Do you put your efforts then on getting people? I mean, treatment's always important, but you focus on really getting people to treatment, or are these people that have been through treatment a million times? And then that would be a different kind of an intervention. But we could, because that's all public record, who was in jail. And so there's no issue with compiling it and sharing it with treatment providers. We could do the same on the mental health side, actually.
Yeah, I mean, to add to Sarah's point, I think the majority of the people that we interact with in the criminal justice have alcohol or meth as a problem. And every homicide pretty much has alcohol or meth as a problem. But compared to other counties, I think we are leaps and bounds around, above with the resources that we have. Defendants always say how wonderful our jail is. We have the reentry program, we have TOP, we have treatment court, we have family treatment court, we have Arbor Place. I don't know what other services we can make available. Like, we are throwing this in their face, and it's just getting them to accept it. And so I don't know the solution, but I do think that we have a lot of opportunities for individuals to get treatment if they wanted.
Well, Andrea, I agree. Your point's well taken. I leave you with this thought, because I won't be meeting with you folks down the road here in the near future. But the whole thing is that we've worked hard in Dunn County collectively. I think we've got some good things going. We play at a high level. But my whole thing, as I watch this over the many years, is I want to see us get these folks up where they're working as hard at it as we are, with their addictions or whatever else it is. It's a simple thing. I'll share a quick story with you. Got a letter from an inmate down in Sheriff Biggs jail down there. He says, God, I screwed up. I want my, Sergeant Owens revoked my Huber. And he said, I screwed up. And he said, big time. I come back to the jail. They identified, they caught it. Now they're holding me accountable. But it's part of that humanness that we take their consciousness up to a different level. The guy said, finally that you caught me now, I totally disrespected Sergeant Owen. He gave me that opportunity to go out and about, and I disrespected him by not following the rules, because Sergeant Owen sat down with me and he explained what the rules were, why they were there, and this is what happens if you violate. But it's kind of getting that connection that these folks will own it. And sometimes, and I see it in family treatment court, Judge Peterson sees it in the adult treatment court. Sometimes they seem to get it. And I just don't know how we do that. And I don't disagree with what, Andrea is saying, as far as, as far as, we're doing a lot, but the question gets, how do we up our effectiveness? That's all I'm saying. And I think we're close. Everybody's done a lot of hard work, and, we're getting better at this all the time, but it's time to, Sheriff, it's time to look at those 100 people that you're chasing around. And then what you need to do is we got to come up with a program. At least they decide after going through our programs, if they can't behave themselves, they best move to another county.
I guess I got a couple thoughts here. One is, what we're hearing in the treatment realm, or kind of the experts, is that this methamphetamine that's getting produced is at the highest potency and at the highest availability it's ever been. So, we're kind of battling the flood of drugs in the community. And there are a number of resources, but it's that the meth is so powerful that people really, it makes it really hard for them to adhere to the treatment and get in with the treatment. And then we've got some challenges on the treatment front, just the kind of them getting back up to full speed, and having the staff to actually provide the treatment services. We do have some reentry funding that we can use towards treatment in jail. Arbor was coming into the jail prior to COVID to do some pre-work with people. We can kind of explore that again if the jail's open to that. But I guess one other recommendation I have is if Katie is willing to kind of convene our data team, our multi kind of agency data team to really start to dig into, the list of meth names and all those other things that we mentioned, to start to look if we can identify some trends or some possible solutions that we can put to play.
Yeah, we can do that. That's fine.
So it sounds as if there is this seems to have ignited some interest across a relatively broad cross-section of us. Is that a fair, for this to be a focus for some attention on the part of this group? Is that thumbs up? Yes? That as good a spot as any. So what I would suggest is, yes, maybe we, the data group put together some just basic information around this frequent users group, pun intended. And then perhaps we can schedule, I don't know that we'll have that done for a July meeting, July meeting, but for an August meeting, maybe we could use this time then to look at that information and also to just do some preliminary brainstorming, drafting of the beginnings of a plan for what we might be able to do going forward. And I think in light of Judge Smeltzer's comment around treatment while you have a ready-made audience, there is some research around that, but we haven't looked at it for a while. So I think it would be a good thing to go back and look at that and say, is there a foundation, at least an empirical foundation, to providing treatment while people are incarcerated, because they are a ready-made audience.
Well, and I think most of you understand that we've got between 30 and 60 different programs in our jail. I mean, we're busting at the seams on the amount of programs available to our inmates, so it's not like they don't have the opportunity if they want to take it. And now we're opening up a little bit more that COVID has gone down. We're starting to get our volunteers back into the jail and stuff. So, I mean, but what we should probably look at is what's been the difference in the last year when we haven't had programs running in the jail, and what we've been doing for the last 5 years with, 30 to 60 programs available to them. Did it really make an impact? Did our recidivism go up because we weren't running the programs in our jail? I mean, we're throwing a lot of money and effort into these people, and it'd be a good, measure of this last year without having the programs available to them in the jail. Is it really doing any good?
Okay, Sheriff Big, here's what I would suggest on that. And what my initial thing, sometimes I'm not saying the total concept completely with you folks, but is what we look at the jail while they're incarcerated. How do we touch those different treatment models that exist that we generally don't let the jail population do? And I'm just saying that even in their jail, because there's two sides of this coin. There's an advantage of having folks in jail because they can't do some of the shit that they do when they're on the outside, okay? But if we can treat them, point them while they're incarcerated into treatment, we do some of the things that Sarah's been beating in my head for the last decade and a half, that we're supposed to get at treatment a little sooner. I get that. And hey, I'm just trying to say out there, think outside the box and try to think of a win-win situation. What we do helps the jail, helps the population, helps their addiction. And this is what I will promise you. If we can do all that stuff and these folks don't cut it, I'll provide transportation for them to the border. You just load them up in my truck, okay? All right, we're good.
All right. Well, we are at 1 o'clock. Thank you for that good discussion. And some ideas of a focus that we can have going forward that would impact many different pieces of this system, potentially impact anyway, positively. So we'll do some work on that over the next month and bring that back. And you have Sarah's written staff report and CJCC meeting on July 15th. And then our next operation committee meeting will be on August 4th. Anything else before we depart for the good of the group?
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
You're not done yet, Judge.
Well, I might be riding my motorcycle at the next meeting. I don't know.
You got another month and a week yet, so.
Well,
Thanks, everybody.